Have you noticed you will change jobs, change partners, even change countries? But you will not sit down for 30 minutes and ask yourself one brutal question. What do I actually want from this life? Not what looks good. Not what keeps the peace. What you want. If no one was watching, if no one had an opinion, stop and think. You will uproot your entire existence before you will face that one conversation with yourself. Here's the truth. There is a single conversation that would rearrange your priorities, your relationships, your sense of self in half an hour. Alone. No phone, no noise, no mask. Just your presence and your emotion. And most people will do anything to avoid it. They will run marathons in the wrong direction rather than sit in that silence for 30 minutes. Why? Because once you hear your real answer, you can never unhear it. Now imagine if you actually had that conversation. Imagine closing the door, sitting with a blank page, and asking, what life am I tolerating and what life do I secretly fantasize about but never admit? You know the fantasy. You edit it out before you fall asleep. The one you quickly bury under logic and fear. That conversation is the doorway between the life you endure and the life you would choose if you took back control. But the truth is, you have built an entire system to dodge that doorway. Constant scrolling, always available to every notification, always reacting to other people's demands. You call it being busy, being responsible, being needed. But the point lies somewhere darker. You are using noise as a shield against your own voice. You would rather be exhausted than honest. A 2019 study in Science showed people would literally choose mild electric shocks over being alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. You are not unique in this avoidance. You are trained into it, so you overwork. You take on one more project. You fill every evening with social obligations. You run endless errands that never really end. You stay in conversations that drain your energy. Because the alternative is sitting in silence with yourself and asking, why am I living like this? I'll tell you why. Cognitive dissonance hurts. It is easier to adjust your story than your life. Easier to say, this is just how it is, than to admit, I have been living under a collage of expectations. Parents, partners, bosses, friends, culture, all layered over you like a mask until you cannot tell where their voice ends and your will begins. So I ask you now, who is actually running your life in this moment? Is it your conscious will, your chosen values, your clear boundary with the world? Or is it a patchwork of other people's fears and hopes that you never stopped to question because you were too busy to be alone with yourself? In the next part, we are going to walk straight into that conversation, and you will see why your avoidance has been so powerful and what happens the second you finally sit still. So what happens when you refuse that conversation and try to fix everything else instead? You already know the pattern. You change the surface. You repaint the walls of your life. But you never walk out of the building. You change jobs. You tell yourself, this new role, this new salary, this new team will finally calm that quiet pressure in your chest. And for a few months, it works, right? New people, new emails, new problems to solve. Your energy is high because distraction feels like purpose. Until one night you are staring at the same ceiling, feeling the same emptiness. And you realize the location changed, but the question did not. Then you change cities, new skyline, new coffee shops, new gym. You post new pictures, you say you needed a fresh start. But the truth is, you pack the same unresolved self into a different apartment. The same restlessness sits on the couch with you. The same dissatisfaction follows you down every unfamiliar street like a shadow that does not care about geography. You change partners too. You tell yourself the last one did not understand you, did not give you what you needed, did not respect your boundary. And yes, some of that is real, but here's the truth. Each relationship collapses in a different way, yet leaves you with the same sentence in your mouth. I am still not where I want to be. You rearranged the furniture. You never left the room. Stop and think. How many times have you done this with hobbies, with goals, with appearances? New diet, new wardrobe, new weekend project. You keep repainting the mask. You never ask who is wearing it. Cognitive dissonance research shows we often change our story before we change our life. You say it is fine, it is normal, it is just stress, because admitting misalignment would demand a decision. Now imagine if I pressed play on an ordinary day for you. The alarm hits. You grab the phone before you grab your own presents, notifications, messages, demands. You answer everything because you are available to everyone. You rush to work. You sit in meetings. You respond to more messages. You come home exhausted. You open more screens. And at no point do you stop and ask, do I even want this life I am maintaining? This is where the point lies. Busyness becomes your shield. It looks respectable. It earns praise. You are hardworking, responsible, always there for people. But the truth is, this is not about productivity. It is about avoidance. You drown the inner voice in noise because silence would force a reaction from you, not from them. So I ask you now, if nothing on the outside changed, no new job, no new city, no new partner, and you finally sat in that uncomfortable silence with yourself, what would crack first? Your job, your relationship, or the image you protect so fiercely? As you will see next, that crack is where your real control begins. And here is where the real punch lands. You are not exhausted because life is too much. You are exhausted because you are living a life that was already scripted for you before you ever sat down to ask what you wanted from it. You are not tired of life. You are tired of a life you did not choose, and your body is screaming that truth through burnout. Stop and think. How many of your daily actions are actually yours? The job you wake up for, the relationship you maintain, the routines you repeat, are they conscious decisions or just momentum from your parents' expectations, society's checklist, your fear of disappointing people? You never really chose the maze you are running, but you blame the running instead of the maze itself. Here's the truth. Your exhaustion is not just from work or responsibilities. Your exhaustion comes from being endlessly available to everyone else while being completely unavailable to yourself. You answer every message. You respond to every emotion in the room. You carry the weight of everyone's crisis. But when was the last time you answered your own call? When was the last time you were truly present with your own desire without a screen in your hand? A study showed people preferred mild electric shocks over sitting alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. That is how far people go to avoid the inner conversation. And I'll tell you why. Because the moment you ask, what do I actually want, you risk blowing up the fragile balance that keeps you functional for others. Your entire world has been organized around keeping you going, not keeping you fulfilled. Look at your life through that lens. Your workplace does not need you fulfilled. It needs you productive. Your family does not need you conscious. It needs you predictable. Your social circle does not need your truth. It needs your mask. The point lies here. When you never ask what you want, you become the reliable background character in everyone else's story. Useful, available, steady, and slowly disappearing. So I ask you now, who would be inconvenienced if you suddenly became honest? Who would panic if you stopped playing the role? Who depends on your unconsciousness because your compliance protects their comfort? When you never question the script, you protect the system that drains your energy and then calls you selfish the moment you set a boundary. But the truth is, you are not tired of life. You are tired of performing a version of you that keeps everyone else calm. You are not tired of existence. You are tired of existing as an answer to other people's expectations. You are not tired of living. You are tired of a life you never chose, and you know it. Now imagine if you sat in that silence long enough to admit that out loud. What would have to change first? The way you work, the way you love, or the way you lie to yourself about both? In the next part, we will turn that inner admission into real external control. And this is exactly where distraction walks in like a polite jailer with a friendly smile. A 2014 study in the journal Science found that people preferred giving themselves mild electric shocks rather than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. Stop and think about that. People chose pain over presence. So I ask you now, when was the last time you sat in silence for 15 minutes without your phone, without music, without a screen, and actually faced your own mind? You say you are busy. You say you have no time. But the truth is, you have no silence. Every notification, every urgent message, every tiny red dot on a screen becomes a perfect escape from the question you fear most. Is this my life or just my schedule? You are not controlled only by people. You are controlled by pings, by vibrations, by the anxiety of being seen as unavailable. Here's the truth. Your phone is not just a tool. It is a shield. When that uncomfortable emotion rises, when your chest tightens at the thought of changing your job, your relationship, your entire trajectory, what do you reach for first? Your courage or your screen? I'll tell you why the screen wins. It offers instant distraction, zero responsibility, the illusion of connection without the risk of honest self-confrontation. Now imagine if someone could design the perfect prison for your attention. It would not have walls, it would have infinite scroll. It would not have guards, it would have urgent emails, group chats, and a calendar full of meetings that do nothing for your soul, but everything for other people's agendas. The point lies here. Predictability serves everyone but you. When you always respond, always show up, always say yes, the world quietly learns that your energy is an on-demand resource. And when you are that predictable, you don't need bars. People know they can pull your reaction with a single message. They know you will answer at midnight. They know you will accept the extra work, the favor, the call, because you have trained them to. This is not about technology, it's about control. Who commands your presence? Who spends your life for you while you are busy answering? Each time you choose the phone instead of 5 minutes of honest self-check-in, you commit a small act of self-betrayal. It looks harmless, it feels productive. But underneath, you are reinforcing one brutal habit. Abandoning yourself the second your inner voice starts to speak. How long will you keep doing that? How long will you postpone the one conversation that could save you years of resentment? Pattern, interrupt. What if the real rebellion is not another app, but airplane mode at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday? What if power is you sitting on your bed, staring at the wall, asking, without flinching, what do I actually want? When you stop being instantly available to every distraction, every demand, every emotional emergency, the entire dynamic of your life begins to tilt. People get confused, some get angry, but your energy starts returning to its rightful owner. In the next part, we will take that returning energy and turn it into boundaries that are not just spoken, but lived. That's when another mechanism quietly activates. When your energy starts returning to you, the people who were feeding on it start to panic. Why do they panic? Because without even saying it, you trained them to believe they had permanent access to you. This is the emotional emergency button dynamic. Certain people know that if they call, you'll pick up. If they text, you'll answer. If they cry, you'll drop everything. You have become their first line of emotional regulation. They don't sit with their fear, their guilt, their anxiety. They outsource it to you. And every time you respond instantly, you reinforce the contract. My emotions are your problem. Now imagine if you stop and think about what that does to your sense of control. Over-availability makes you predictable. Predictability makes you usable. Once you are usable, people stop relating to your humanity and start relating to your function. You are the listener, the fixer, the one who always shows up. Not a person with limits, but a tool with a reliable on switch. Here's the truth. When you are treated like a tool, resentment grows in silence. You smile, you nod, you say, "Of course, no problem." While a quieter voice inside whispers, "What about me?" That is identity erosion. Not dramatic, not loud, just a slow leak in your sense of self every time your automatic yes overrides your actual desire. And this is where the avoided conversation hides. As long as you never sit down and ask, what do I actually want? How do I actually feel about this? You will keep defaulting to what everyone else wants from you. The external emergency always feels more urgent than your internal truth. It is easier to manage their crisis than to face your own emptiness. So you stay busy, you stay available, you stay numb. But the point lies here. The moment you start withdrawing your automatic yes, the power structure flips. People experience your boundary as a loss, not a correction. They feel like something is being taken from them, when in reality they were living on energy that was never theirs. Your time, your presence, your attention had become an assumed possession, not a gift. So I ask you now, when you finally say no and someone reacts with guilt trips, anger, or silent treatment, what are they really saying? You changed, or I lost control of my favorite button. But the truth is, this is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. If everyone around you benefits from you never questioning your role, who is going to encourage you to have that inner conversation? Who is going to say, disappear for a while, go be alone, go disappoint us so you can be honest with yourself? Almost no one. Which means if that conversation is going to happen, you will have to protect it yourself. In the next part, we will turn that protection into concrete boundaries where your silence is not escape, but deliberate self-respect. So stop and think, why is that conversation with yourself so hard to protect? Why does silence with your own mind feel more dangerous than any argument with other people? Carl Jung gave us the backdrop for this entire struggle. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were trained to be, not the mask you built to stay safe, who you are when the performance ends and your presence is no longer for sale." Jung called that process individuation. In simple terms, it is the journey from the life that was handed to you to the life that actually fits you, from automatic yes to conscious choice, from being constantly available to everyone else's emotion to finally being available to your own. And here's the truth, that one honest conversation you keep postponing is not a side exercise. It is individuation in real time. I'll tell you why your psyche keeps pushing for it. Individuation is not some abstract spiritual hobby. It is your nervous system trying to align your outer life with your inner truth, so you can stop leaking energy through 1,000 tiny self-betrayals. When you feel that pull to withdraw, to go quiet, to disappear for a weekend, that is not laziness. That is your deeper self asking for an audience. But the truth is, you have been trained to read the signals backwards. You feel irritation at a message and you call yourself dramatic. You feel burnout at work and you call yourself weak. You say yes, then feel resentful, and you label yourself ungrateful. What if all of that is wrong? What if those reactions are not defects but alarms? Think about the last time you agreed to help, stayed late, answered the call, and then felt strangely empty. On the surface, you did the right thing. Inside, something went cold. That coldness is not you being heartless. That coldness is your deeper self saying, you just traded your energy for approval again. The point lies here. Irritation is the psyche's way of telling you this boundary was crossed. Burnout is its way of saying, this life does not match your truth. So I ask you now, what happens if you stop treating those signals as evidence that you are broken and start treating them as a diagnosis that something in your life is? This is not about blaming yourself. It's about finally listening to yourself. When you feel that spike of resentment after another yes, that is your inner life protesting the mask you are wearing in public. Your discomfort is not the problem to medicate away, drown in scrolling or silence with one more distraction. It is the message you have been refusing to read. And in the next part, we are going to open that message line by line. Translate what your irritation is actually saying, and then ask a harder question. If you really believed it, what would you have to change tomorrow? So let's open it. Not in theory, not as a nice idea, but with you under the microscope. When you make a decision, whose voice is actually running the show? Is it your own clear inner voice? Or is it your mother's fear, your father's standards, your partner's opinions? Or this vague, heavy cloud of, what will people think, pressing on your chest? Stop and think about the last 3 big choices you made: job, relationship, where you live. Did you choose them? Or did you choose the option that would create the least conflict, the least noise, the least emotion from other people? When you say yes to an invitation you don't want, is that your desire speaking, or your terror of disappointing someone who has gotten used to your permanent availability? Now imagine if you froze your current life exactly as it is and pressed play for 10 more years. Same work, same routine, same way you use your phone to escape your own presence. What would you regret most when you look back from that future? The work you stayed in? The relationship you never addressed honestly? The silence you kept about what you actually want? And here's the truth. If you already know the answer, why haven't you faced it yet? Look at your daily behavior. How many times do you say yes when every cell in your body is screaming no? How often do you reply instantly to messages, not because you are free, but because you feel guilty if you don't? How many paragraphs do you write to justify a simple boundary, over-explaining why you need rest, why you can't meet, why you are not available, as if your exhaustion needs a legal defense? Pay attention to the pattern. You apologize for needing sleep. You apologize for not answering right away. You apologize for feeling overwhelmed. And people smile when you bend. They praise you when you sacrifice. They call you so reliable when you ignore your own limits. But when you slow your reaction, when you say no without a PowerPoint of reasons, when you choose silence instead of instant access, the temperature changes, doesn't it? This is where the manipulation hides. Others may not even be fully conscious of it, but they reward your compliance and punish your boundaries. Warmth when you obey, coldness when you resist, approval when you are available, guilt, distance, or drama when you reclaim control. Without saying a word, they train your nervous system to avoid the inner conversation that would change the rules of the whole game. So I ask you now, whose script are you living? Because the point lies here. Every time you override your own truth just to keep the peace, you are not being nice. You are committing a quiet betrayal. You teach your own mind that your inner voice has less value than external approval. This is not about being selfish, it's about being honest. And in the next part, we're going to take that honesty and turn it into concrete boundaries that no longer require an apology. So now take that honesty and follow it to its real consequence. There is a bill you've been avoiding paying. Not in money, in emotion, in energy. And it doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in tiny charges that feel normal in the moment and lethal over time. The forced yes when every cell in your body wanted to say no. The late-night email reply that no one demanded but you sent anyway because you're responsible. The weekend you give away to someone else's crisis. Again. The conversation you endure with a smile when your whole system is screaming to exit. Stop and think, how many times a week do you do this to yourself? Here's the truth. Every one of those moments is a small self-betrayal. It looks harmless, it looks professional, it looks generous, but internally, something very precise happens. You override your own reaction, you mute your own boundary, you make yourself available when you're already empty. You teach your nervous system that your presence belongs to everyone but you. Now imagine if you could see your energy as a physical substance like water in a tank. Each time you override your truth, you don't just lose a bit of energy. It's like tearing off a small piece of your life force and handing it away, without a receipt, without record, without any way to claim it back. One forced yes, rip. One fake laugh, rip. One extra project you didn't want, rip. The tank doesn't explode, it just quietly leaks. The point lies here. You don't collapse in one dramatic burnout. You erode. You wake up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. You feel a low-grade frustration at everyone and no one. You snap at small things, then apologize and hate yourself for overreacting. On paper, life looks fine, but inside there's this flat, this grey emptiness. As if you're watching your own existence through glass. I'll tell you why this happens. When you avoid the inner conversation, you never sit down and renegotiate your commitments. You don't ask, does this job still match who I am, or is it just familiar? Does this relationship honor my real self, or only the mask I've been performing? You change schedules, you change phones, you change locations, but you don't change the contract you have with your own time and presence. So your life fills with obligations that belong to an older version of you. You keep paying with today's energy for yesterday's decisions. You say yes because that's who I am, even though that identity is choking you. This is not about being dramatic. It's about being exact. Chronic tiredness, quiet resentment, and emotional numbness are often just the interest on unpaid inner truth. So I ask you now, are you actually depressed? Or are you exhausted from maintaining a life that doesn't belong to you anymore? You're not broken for feeling this way. You're not a monster for wanting out of a life that drains you. But the truth is, this conversation we're having now terrifies people because they think it leads to one extreme, disappearing, ghosting everyone, burning every bridge in the name of self-care. Stop and think. Who taught you that the only options are total sacrifice or total abandonment? That if you stop being permanently available, you must become cold, selfish, heartless. This is not about turning into a stone. It's about finally refusing to live as a sponge. You are not being invited to run away from everyone. You are being invited to stop running away from yourself. Here's the truth. You have been loyal to everyone except the one person who pays the full price for your decisions. You. You show up for people who would never sit with your pain for 5 minutes. Yet you call it being a good friend, being a good partner, being a good son or daughter. The point lies here. This is not about cutting people off. It's about cutting off the habit of treating your needs as optional. Now imagine if loyalty included you. Imagine saying, I will not promise what destroys my health. I will not agree to what empties my energy just to protect someone else's comfort. That is not cruelty. That is adulthood. That is you taking control of the only life you actually feel from the inside. Carl Jung called this individuation, becoming who you truly are. Instead of just being the mask other people prefer, individuation is not isolation. It is relation without chains. It means you relate from choice, not compulsion, from clarity, not guilt. You can still love, still care, still be present. But your presence is no longer a reaction to pressure. It's an expression of who you are. So how do you begin this without blowing up your life overnight? You start with the inner conversation you've avoided for years, or it is brutally simple. Question 1. What do I actually want if no one could be disappointed in me? Question 2. What am I pretending not to know about my life right now? Ask them slowly. Ask them in silence. Ask them without your phone, without the noise, without performing for anyone. I'll tell you why these questions are so powerful, because they expose where your boundaries should have been all along. When you finally admit what you want and what you already know, saying no stops feeling aggressive. It becomes alignment. Stepping back from certain people is no longer an attack. It is a correction. Your silence is not punishment. It is protection of your energy and your truth. So I ask you now, if you really listen to those answers, what would have to change? And more importantly, what do you do when the world refuses to accept the new you that walks out of that conversation? When the world refuses to accept the new you, you are standing at a crossroads. Do you argue louder, or do you go quiet? You have been trained to fight for your explanation, to debate for your right to exist. But what if the real power move is the one you were never taught? To stop explaining yourself at all. Stop and think. How much of your life has been spent in arguments that went nowhere, in long messages defending your intention, in late-night calls justifying your emotion to people who had already decided their story about you? You talk, they twist. You clarify, they deny. You raise your voice, they raise their mask. Endless reaction, zero resolution. I'll tell you why this drains you. Every explanation is energy. Every defense is psychic fuel burned to keep someone else comfortable with who they want you to be. Manipulative people survive on your reactions. They need you to protest, to overtalk, to prove, because as long as you are performing, they never have to meet your real presence. Now imagine if, in the middle of that same conversation, you stopped. No dramatic exit, no slammed door, just a clear, calm withdrawal of your availability. You listen, you say, "I hear you," and then you do not justify, you do not beg, you do not send the 3-page essay. You go silent. Instantly, the power dynamic flips, because you are no longer auditioning for a role in their story. But the truth is, this is not about sulking, it's about sovereignty. This is not about punishing them, it's about protecting you. Passive, aggressive disappearing is still a performance for other people. Conscious silence is different. You are not hiding, you are stepping back into awareness and asking the one question that terrifies the false self. Do I actually want to be here? Do I want this dynamic, this demand, this version of me? When you stop reflexively responding, a gap appears. In that gap, your real desires start to speak. Your body tells you where your boundary is. Your emotion stops screaming at them and starts signaling to you. Science shows people would rather shock themselves than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. Why? Because in that silence, the truth they have postponed for years shows up and asks for an answer. Here's the truth. Withdrawal, when chosen consciously, is an act of power. Not replying immediately is power. Letting a call ring out while you breathe and feel is power. Saying, "I'll answer tomorrow," and actually giving yourself that space is power. The point lies here. You are declaring that your inner life has more value than winning this momentary argument. So I ask you now, what would happen if, this month, the most radical conversation you had was 30 minutes of uninterrupted silence with yourself? No phone, no music, no input. Just you, your breath, your thoughts that you keep outrunning. Terrifying? Good. Because on the other side of that silence is the next step we need to talk about. What you actually do with the truth you finally hear. So let's go further. Imagine those 30 minutes actually happen. No escape, no scrolling, no noise. It's just you and you. What do you think would surface first? I'll tell you why that question matters. Because this is the moment where you either look yourself in the eye or you abandon yourself again. How long will you keep doing that? How long will you keep saying yes when your whole body is screaming no? How long will you keep calling the tightness in your chest stress instead of what it really is, your soul protesting a life you never consciously chose? Stop and think. You will switch jobs, partners, even countries before you will sit still for 15 minutes and ask, what do I actually want? There is research showing people prefer mild electric shocks over being alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. People would rather be in pain than be in truth. So I ask you now, how long will you keep running from the only conversation that could actually set you free? Look at your week. How long will you keep living for weekends? Counting down 5 days just to feel alive for 2. How long will you keep calling this just a phase when the phase has lasted years? How long will you keep telling yourself you're tired of life but the truth is, you're just exhausted from playing a role that drains every drop of your energy? Here's the truth. Every unexamined expectation in your life is a string. Your parents' voice in your head? String. That idea that you must always be available or you'll be abandoned? String. The belief that your value depends on how much you sacrifice? Another string. And every time you avoid this inner conversation, every time you swallow your no, every time you betray your own boundary, you hand someone else another string. Now imagine if we could see you from above. How many strings are attached to you right now? Work, family, friends, their opinions, their moods, their emergencies. One pull and you react. Another pull and you smile. Another pull and you apologize. You call it being a good person. But the point lies here. This is not about being good, it's about being controlled. So what happens when you start cutting strings? When you stop being instantly predictable and available, something powerful happens. You stop being a puppet and you start becoming a mystery. People can't just press a button and get a reaction. They have to actually know you. They have to ask, not assume. They have to respect your silence instead of consuming your presence. And yes, that will scare them, because a mysterious you is a you they cannot own. But it should scare you more to realize how long you've been owned. The title of this video is not just a phrase, it is a mirror. Before this ends, you will have to look into it and answer one question. How long will you keep abandoning yourself? So now we arrive at the title in its raw form. Why most people avoid the one conversation that matters. Not with their boss, not with their partner, not with their parents. The conversation with themselves about what they actually want from their one life. Not what looks good. Not what keeps everyone calm, what they want. And yet they run, you run. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the moment you sit in silence with that question, you feel the first fear. If you admit what you want, you might disappoint people. The family that invested in a certain image, the partner who expects a certain role, the friends who only recognize you behind the same old mask. To honor your own desire feels like betrayal. So you betray yourself instead. Then comes the second fear. If you change, you might lose status, relationships, the fragile control you have. What happens to your social circle if you stop being always available, always agreeable, always the emotional emergency button? What happens when your new boundary is when your new exposes who only valued your function, not your presence? Many people would rather keep a life they hate than risk a life where some people walk away. The third fear cuts even deeper. To have this conversation is to admit that many past choices were misaligned, that you stayed in the wrong job for 10 years, that you chose the safe partner over the true connection, that you sold your energy to be accepted. Facing this means facing wasted time, sunk effort, the pain of, I knew, but I ignored it. So instead of owning that, you adjust the story. Here's the truth. Your mind would rather rewrite the narrative than rewrite the life. That's cognitive dissonance, the tension between what you feel and what you live. So you tell yourself, it's not that bad, this is just adulthood. No one is really happy. The point lies here. You protect the structure, even when the structure is slowly killing your emotion, your vitality, your inner control, because change feels like death to the ego, to the persona, to the mask you have been polishing for years. So you cling to the familiar pain, the predictable resentment, the quiet burnout. You wake up drained, you scroll, you stay busy, you fill every second. So you don't have to stop and think, where was this my life or just my performance? Now imagine if you gave yourself 30 honest minutes instead of another 3 hours of distraction. The emotional cost of avoiding that is brutal. You become a ghost in your own story, present for everyone, absent for yourself. You keep reacting to other people's needs, but never responding to your own. You feel used, unseen, replaceable. Yet you keep volunteering for the same role because you refuse to ask, what do I actually want? This is not about selfishness, it's about survival. So I ask you now, how far will you go to avoid that one conversation? Most people will do anything. They will change jobs, partners, countries, but never the script inside their head. They will die having never met their own truth. The question is, are you going to be most people? Or are you ready to hear what your silence has been trying to tell you? You weren't born avoiding this conversation. You were trained out of it. As a child, you didn't ask, what do people expect from me? You asked, what do I want? Then the world answered you with rewards and punishments until you learned to reverse that question. Think back. When were you praised the most? When you were easy, no trouble, such a good kid? When you shared, waited, adapted? When you were available on demand for parents, teachers, siblings? But when you said no, when you were intense, when you wanted something different? Suddenly the room got cold, the faces tightened. Love didn't vanish, but it pulled back just enough for you to feel the threat. Here's the truth. They were not villains. They were busy, stressed, trapped in their own masks. But the truth is, your nervous system didn't care about their excuses. It only learned the rule. When I disappear and comply, I am safe. When I show desire, I am dangerous. So you started editing yourself. You lowered your voice. You shrank your needs. You became emotionally on call for the moods of the adults around you. Stop and think about the rules you absorbed. Respond quickly. Don't make people wait. Don't be selfish. Don't disappoint. Be grateful for what you get. Don't ask for more. Don't cry too loud. Don't take up space. These weren't written on a wall. They were written in every sigh when you hesitated, every don't start when you had big emotion, every proud smile when you swallowed your reaction to keep the peace. The point lies here, your worth quietly fused with your availability. You weren't valuable because you were you. You were valuable because you were useful, because you could calm, help, fix, entertain, achieve. Your presence became a tool for other people's comfort. So of course you learned to scan every room. What do they need? What do they want from me? Who do I have to be to keep control of this fragile piece? Now imagine if that child grows up. New environment, same script. This is you overworking at a job you don't respect, terrified of disappointing a manager, who would replace you in a week. This is you over caretaking in relationships, answering every message, smoothing every conflict, saying yes while your body screams no. You don't stop long enough to ask what you actually want, because silence feels like danger. Doing nothing feels like you're failing someone. I'll tell you why you're exhausted. It's not just the workload, it's the constant performance, the permanent mask. Every boundary feels like betrayal. Every delay in your reaction feels like a crime. You underestimate how much energy you spend being endlessly available, emotionally and digitally, because you still believe your value depends on it. So I ask you now, what conversation are you avoiding? It's not with your boss, not with your partner. It's the one your younger self never got permission to have. What do I want, even if it disappoints people? In the next part, we're going to step into that question and see what happens when you finally let that child speak. And here is where the lie shows up, dressed as a virtue. Here's a truth you were never told. Being endlessly available doesn't make you a good person. It makes you an easy person to use. You were trained to confuse sacrifice with love, exhaustion with loyalty, and silence about your needs with maturity. But the truth is that training became your cage. Stop and think, how much of your day is lived on other people's timing? Messages, calls, notifications. Do you have a minute, Wooty? You're so good at this. Can you help? Your phone lights up. Your emotions light up. Your nervous system lights up. You react. You respond. You solve. And slowly, without ever signing a contract, you become the permanent emergency exit for everyone else's anxiety. This is not about being caring. It's about being captured. Availability becomes a prison when you are reachable 24/7, emotionally and digitally. And you don't even remember choosing that role. You are always on call as the therapist friend, the reliable co-worker, the child who never says no to family, the partner who absorbs every mood. You don't live in your home. You live in a psychological call center where your presence is always waiting to be used. I'll tell you why this prison is so effective. It doesn't need bars. It uses praise. Bosses reward your reliability, then dump the extra work on your desk at 6 p.m. knowing you won't push back. Partners admire your patience, then unload their chaos on you instead of going to therapy. Friends celebrate that you're always there, while never asking what that constant availability is costing your energy and your dreams. Society claps. You collapse. Now imagine if you tracked the real consequences. You become the default problem solver, the emotional sponge, the backup plan when everyone else's life falls apart. You listen to their crises while your own ideas sit in a forgotten notebook. You help them chase their goals while your own stay on the shelf, collecting dust and resentment. The point lies here. Your life did not stop because you lacked potential. It paused because you made being available your highest value. Research shows people would rather give themselves mild electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. So, of course, they love you always being reachable. Your constant reaction saves them from their own silence. But who saves you from yours? So I ask you now, when did you decide that your highest value was to be available? And what did you have to bury in yourself to maintain that image? Your anger, your ambition, your need for rest, for solitude, for sacred isolation. In the next part, we're going to touch that buried place and see what happens when your boundaries stop apologizing and your presence stops being free. That buried place is exactly where your predictability was built, because once people learned your pattern, they stopped seeing your depth and started using your function. You became the reliable yes, the guaranteed reply, the one who will always pick up at 2 a.m., always cover the shift, always listen to the same crisis. Stop and think. When someone can predict you with that level of precision, what are you for them, a person or a tool? Here's the truth. Predictability is a liability when it lives in your reactions instead of your values. When people can map you like a script. If I guilt them, they'll apologize. If I cry, they'll drop everything. If I act distant, they'll chase. You are no longer a mystery. You are no longer a presence. You are a function. You are the emotional vending machine that never runs out of energy, as long as they press the right button. Now imagine if there was literally a red button on your chest. Boredom? Press. Loneliness? Press. Stress, anxiety, fear of being alone with their own thoughts? Press, press, press. Science literally shows people would rather give themselves mild electric shocks than sit in silence with their mind for 15 minutes. So what do they do in real life? They reach for their favorite human distraction. They reach for you. They press the emotional emergency button. They dump their emotion into your nervous system. They feel lighter. And what happens next? The use-discard cycle. They get relief. They calm down. They go back to their life. You go back to your room drained, buzzing with their anxiety, replaying every word, wondering if you said the right thing. They sleep. You stare at the ceiling. Do you see the imbalance of control here? The point lies in this. As long as you are predictable, they don't have to grow. They don't have to face their emptiness, their responsibility, their own lack of boundary. Why would they, if they know that one call, one text, one tear will activate your automatic response? This is not about helping, it's about being used as a mask, so they never meet their real face. So I ask you now, when they press that button, who decided you had to answer? Who told you your value equals your availability? Because the avoided conversation is brutally simple. Do I actually want to be this for them? Not can I, not should I, not what will they think, but do I want this role in my life? Until you ask that, you will keep playing it on autopilot. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. The moment you break the pattern, the moment you don't pick up, don't reply instantly, don't rush to fix, people will be shocked. They will say you changed. They will say you are cold, selfish, distant. But the truth is, their shock is not proof you are wrong. Their shock is diagnosis. It reveals exactly how much they depended on your predictability to avoid themselves. In the next part, we're going to see what happens when that button stops working and what surfaces when silence answers instead of you. And this is where Jung walks in with a brutal mirror. He called it the persona. In simple terms, it's the mask you wear so people accept you, approve of you, reward you. It's the role you learn to play so you could survive in the group. But the truth is, that mask is not the full truth of who you are. It's a costume. It's a contract. Your persona might have a very specific name. The reliable one, the strong one, the helper, the achiever. You know these roles. You feel them in your spine. You are the one who picks up the phone at 2 a.m., who never breaks down, who solves everyone's crisis, who over-delivers at work. On the surface, that looks noble. But stop and think. How much of that is genuine care? And how much is fear of losing your place in people's lives if you stop being available on demand? Here's the truth. Every persona demands self-suppression as payment. To be the reliable one, you swallow your anger when someone cancels on you again. To be the strong one, you hide your tears, your confusion, your exhaustion. To be the helper, you ignore your own needs until your energy is gone. To be the achiever, you sacrifice sleep, joy, even health, just to keep the image intact. This is not about generosity, it's about control. Control over how people see you, so you don't have to risk being seen as you really are. Look at your small daily reactions. You say, "It's okay, don't worry about it," when it is not okay at all. You reply instantly to messages, not because you have time, but because you need them to feel you care. You over-explain every boundary. I'm so sorry, I wish I could, I feel bad saying no, as if you must apologize for protecting your own life. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been teaching people that your needs come last? Now imagine if you didn't. Imagine you took 10 extra minutes before replying. Imagine you said, "No, I can't," without an essay. Imagine you admitted, "I am not okay with this." Feel the panic in your chest. I will tell you why. The more you invest in the persona, the more terrifying it feels to ask what you actually want, because your real desire might threaten the mask's survival. If you are not always available, will they still love you? If you are not always strong, will they still respect you? The point lies here. The persona is terrified of silence, because silence exposes the gap between your role and your reality. So I ask you now, if you took the mask off in a room alone with no one to impress or reassure, what would you admit about your life right now? In the next part, we're going to walk into that room together, and confront the answer you keep postponing. So let's walk into that room. No audience, no mask, just you and the conversation you dodge every single day. You say you want clarity, peace, control over your life. But the truth is, you avoid the one place where that clarity actually appears. The moment you admit how often you abandon yourself. This is the pattern. Subtle self-abandonment. Not dramatic betrayals. Micro moments. You feel a no in your body, and a yes comes out of your mouth. You feel your energy drop, and you still say, "It's fine." Your chest tightens when they ask for another favor, but your lips smile and say, "No problem, I got it." Then you tell yourself it's not a big deal. How many not a big deals are you carrying right now? Stop and think about today alone. The message you answered even though you were exhausted. The call you picked up when you wanted silence. The meeting you agreed to even though you knew it would drain you. Each time there was a tiny inner protest, a small, honest reaction, and each time you overruled it to stay available, pleasant, impressive. That is self-abandonment in slow motion. Why do you do it? I'll tell you why. Approval. You want to be seen as good, reliable, strong. Fear of rejection. You're terrified that a no will make people pull away. Fear of conflict. You'd rather pay with your energy than face someone's disappointment. And under all of that, a fragile image you're desperate to protect. The easygoing one, the tough one, the one who can handle anything. This is not about kindness, it's about survival. But the truth is, every time you choose their comfort over your truth, you pay. You pay with your peace. You pay with your self-trust. You teach your nervous system that your own signals are negotiable, that your inner voice has no authority. Over months and years, that becomes burnout, resentment, emotional numbness. You don't explode, you just fade. Here's the truth your persona hates. Your energy is not infinite. Psychological research is clear. Your mental and emotional resources are limited and deplete across the day. Every hour you give to what you don't want is an hour you cannot give to what you secretly crave. Every yes to a life that does not fit you is a silent no to the life that could. So I ask you now, how many times today did you abandon yourself in small ways? Not last year. Today. And now imagine if you had to feel the full weight of all those "it's fine" moments at once, with no distraction, no scrolling, no noise to sedate you. What would surface? Anger? Grief? The realization that you have built a life around avoiding your own no. In the next part, we're going to do something radical. Instead of numbing that weight, we will listen to it and let it become the boundary you never learned to draw. So now you're sitting with that weight. No scrolling, no noise. Just you and the truth you've been dodging. But there's another truth hiding underneath it that hurts even more. Some of the people around you don't actually want you. They want what you provide. Stop and think about that. If tomorrow you stopped being the late-night therapist, the last-minute saver, the always-available comfort, what would happen to half of your connections? Would they lean in, or would they quietly disappear the moment your function stopped feeding them? Here's the truth. A lot of relationships are not built on mutual presence. They're built on utility. You provide validation, so they don't have to face their own emptiness. You provide company, so they never sit alone with their thoughts. You provide distraction, so they can avoid the same inner conversation you're avoiding. You provide comfort, labor, status, access, reputation, emotional regulation. They feel better when you are on call, not because they value your soul, but because your energy sedates their anxiety. Look at your life. You're the one listening to endless venting while they never ask how you are. You're the one covering shifts, fixing crises, jumping on calls, doing the invisible emotional labor that keeps everything running. You're the default planner, the fixer, the mediator, the one who remembers birthdays, buys the gifts, organizes the meetups. They say you're so reliable. But what they really mean is you're always available to be used. Now imagine if you changed one thing. You answer later. You say, "I can't tonight." You don't pick up the phone at 1 a.m. You don't volunteer to solve the problem. You draw a simple boundary. "I'm not able to talk about this right now." Or, "I won't cover for you this time." Watch the reaction. Suddenly there's irritation in their voice. Guilt trips appear. You've changed. You're being selfish. "You're not there for me like you used to be." Or worse, there's this cold distance, this quiet punishment, this emotional silence that says, "If you won't play your role, your presence is no longer required." But the truth is, you didn't change. You stopped being as functional for them. Their reaction is the X-ray. It shows exactly what they were attached to. Your mask, not your essence. Your availability, not your humanity. The point lies right there in that uncomfortable moment. When your control over your own energy increases, their control over your reactions decreases. And that's when their real face comes out. So I ask you now, if someone only values you when you're abandoning yourself, what exactly are you afraid of losing by having the conversation that would change that? What are you protecting? The relationship or the illusion of it? And if this is what happens when you draw one small boundary, what will surface when you finally speak the deeper truth you've been silencing about what you really want from your life and who really deserves a place in it? Now we have to touch the rule almost no one wants to admit. The more available something is, the less people value it. The rarer it is, the more carefully it's treated. You know this with money, with luxury items, with limited time offers. But the truth is, it's even more brutal with human presence. When you are always there, you become background noise. When you are scarce, you become a signal. Stop and think about how you treat a disposable rag. You wipe the counter, you throw it aside, you don't thank it, you don't protect it. If it tears, you grab another. No ceremony, no respect. Now imagine if, in the same kitchen, there is one fragile, handcrafted glass you inherited from your grandmother. You don't grab it with greasy hands, you don't toss it in the sink, you slow down, you pay attention, your whole body language changes. Here's the truth. When you make yourself emotionally on demand, you turn into the rag everyone reaches for when they spill. Bad day, they call you crisis. They created, they unload on you bored. They text you. They wipe their emotion onto your nervous system and walk away lighter, while your energy is soaked. And tomorrow, they do it again, because you trained them that you will always absorb it. The point lies here. No one respects what they don't have to earn. No one values what is always there, regardless of how they treat it. This is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming conscious. If your presence is guaranteed, your reaction predictable, your boundary flexible, people stop asking, do I deserve this person? And start assuming they'll be there no matter what I do. That is how self-abandonment gets disguised as generosity. So I ask you now, what are you teaching people about your value by how endlessly available you are? Every time you answer at midnight, every time you cancel your plan for someone who never does the same, every time you break your own boundary to keep the peace, you are sending a message. Not just to them, to yourself. You are telling your own psyche, my time is cheap, my energy is replaceable, my presence is a default, not a decision. I'll tell you why scarcity matters. When you start being selective with your time and energy, you are not playing games, you are reprogramming your worth. Conscious unavailability is not manipulation, it is calibration. You are saying, my presence has a cost, and the cost is respect. You start answering later, you start saying no, you let silence do the work you used to do with long explanations, and something shifts. The people who only valued you as an emotional rag will complain, guilt trip, call you selfish. The ones who truly see you will adjust, slow down, match your respect. Your inner conversation will force a choice: who actually gets access to you, and who only had access because you never stopped to think about it. In the next part, we'll go straight into that confrontation with yourself. So I ask you now, who actually deserves you? Not in theory, in reality. Who has proven through their reactions, through their silence, through their behavior, when you were not convenient, that your presence has value to them? And who only shows up when you are useful, available, easy to control? This is not about being harsh. It's about being accurate. Stop and think about the last week. Who listened when you spoke without turning the conversation back to themselves? Who respected your boundary when you said, I'm tired, I can't talk right now, instead of pushing, guilting, or sulking? Who made you feel heavier after every interaction? And who left your energy calmer, clearer, more centered? Your nervous system already knows the answer. Your mind is the one making excuses. Here's the truth. Some people deserve more of you, more presence, more attention, more access, not because they are perfect, but because when you are with them, you don't have to wear a mask just to keep the peace. They handle your silence without panic. They don't need you to perform an emotion to feel secure. With them, you can be honest, and the connection survives. But the truth is, there is another side to this question that you avoid. Who deserves your absence? Who has been living on overdraft from your emotional bank account, constantly withdrawing reassurance, time, explanations, while depositing almost nothing back? Now imagine if for the next month they could not reach you as easily. No instant replies, no emergency therapy calls at midnight, no automatic yes when they snap their fingers. What would collapse in their life and what would finally heal in yours? The point lies here. Your absence is not punishment. It is information. It tells people access to me is not free, random, or guaranteed. It teaches them your value more clearly than 1,000 speeches. Silence can be a boundary. Distance can be a boundary. Not reacting is also a boundary. The question is, are you willing to let some people experience life without your constant availability? Long enough to feel the difference? To do that, you need criteria. You cannot keep giving your deepest energy to whoever is loudest, closest, or most dramatic. Who gets immediate access? Who gets delayed responses? Who gets no response at all? On what basis? Reciprocity, respect, emotional safety. If you don't define this, your past conditioning will define it for you, and this is where the avoided conversation comes back in. How can you know who deserves your presence or your absence? If you have never sat down and asked yourself with brutal honesty, what do I actually want? What do I value? What kind of relationships am I willing to build? And at what cost to myself? Without that inner dialogue, you are just reacting. You are not choosing, you are drifting. I'll tell you why this matters. People would rather shock themselves than sit alone with their thoughts, because facing this truth is uncomfortable, but discomfort is the doorway to control. In the next section, we'll build a clear framework so you can have this inner conversation regularly, protect your energy on purpose, and turn your reflections into concrete action. So here is the framework. No theory, no aesthetics. The life you want is on the other side of a brutally honest 30-minute conversation you've been avoiding for years. Not a retreat, not a course. 30 minutes. You and the truth you keep postponing. This is not journaling for aesthetics. It's interrogation. The conditions are strict for a reason. No phone, no music, no podcasts, no input. Just you, a notebook, and your raw presence. You sit, you breathe, you do not negotiate with the urge to get up. Why so extreme? I'll tell you why. Every notification, every tab, every distraction exists to rescue you from yourself, to keep you available to everyone except the one person who actually needs your attention, and you. So you sit in that silence and you start with the first question. What do I actually want if no one could be disappointed? Not what is reasonable, not what your parents expect, not what your partner, your boss, your friends would applaud. What would you choose if no one's reaction could punish you? Stop and think. If your answer feels forbidden, you are finally touching something real. Then you ask, what am I doing right now that I would immediately stop if I felt completely safe? The job that drains your energy. The relationship that survives only because you're afraid of being alone. The constant availability that turns you into an emotional emergency button for other people. When you write that down, notice what your body does. Do your hands shake? Do you suddenly remember a message you must check? That is not random. That is your fear trying to pull you back under the mask. Next. What am I pretending is fine that is slowly killing me? The chronic exhaustion, the fake smile at work, the way you abandon your own boundary every time someone raises their voice. This is where panic shows up. You will feel the urge to get up, to check the time, to water a plant, to reorganize a drawer. Here's the truth. That urge is proof you are finally close to the core. Fear is not a stop sign here, it is a compass. So I ask you now, when that wave hits, will you escape or will you stay? When your mind screams, oh, this is too much, can you give it 5 more breaths, 5 more lines on the page, 5 more seconds of ruthless honesty? Because the point lies right there. If you can stay in that discomfort for just 30 uninterrupted minutes, something in your life will become impossible to keep pretending about. You will see the job, the relationship, the habit you can no longer explain away. And in the next part, we're going to take that one unbearable truth and turn it into a boundary so real it changes how people are allowed to access your energy. So now you've seen it, the job, the relationship, the habit you can't explain away anymore. Here's the danger no one warns you about. If you stop there, if you collect that truth like a quote on your phone and keep living the same way, you don't just stay stuck. You cross into a deeper level of self-betrayal, and you still don't move. Stop and think what that does to your self-respect. Every time your inner conversation says, this is draining my energy, and your outer life says, but I'll keep saying yes. You teach your nervous system a brutal lesson. Your clarity has no power. Insight without action becomes another mask. You look conscious, you talk about awareness, but you're still available to everyone and everything that exhausts you. So the point lies here. The inner conversation is not a journal exercise, it's a pipeline. You sit in silence, You face your own emotion. You ask, what do I actually want? What do I absolutely not want? And the answers must harden into boundaries in time, in work, in relationships, in your digital life. Otherwise, that clarity starts to rot into resentment. Now imagine if you actually honored what you heard. Your inner voice says, this role is killing me. The boundary becomes, I reduce my hours, or I move out of this position within 6 months. Gallup shows most employees are disengaged because their job doesn't match their values. You're not broken. Your environment is misaligned. The conversation's job is to expose that. Your job is to change how available you are to that misalignment. Another example, you realize every weekend you leave social events feeling empty, not energized. Insight says, these people feed on my presence but never feed my soul. Action says, I go once a month, not every time, or I leave after 2 hours, no explanations. This is not about becoming cold, it's about protecting the small amount of energy you actually have. Digital life? Same rule. You see that being always on, replying in seconds, lets people control your reaction. So you set response windows, you answer messages twice a day, you turn off notifications at night, you stop explaining your silence. Research shows people underestimate how accepting others will be when they say no. I'll tell you why that matters. Most of the backlash you fear is a phantom in your head. And when backlash does appear, that's data, that's exposure. The people who explode when you stop being instantly available are the ones who were relating to your function, not your value. They needed your reaction to regulate their own chaos. When you choose control, when you choose boundary, their mask falls off first, not yours. So I ask you now, what will this conversation cost you today? Because if it doesn't cost you some comfort, some approval, some familiar chaos in the short term, it probably wasn't honest enough. In the next part, we're going to take that cost and show you why paying it is the only way your future self will ever trust you again. So you paid the cost. You sat in that silence. You watched which people panicked when you stopped being available on command. Now what? Do you just go back to the same life, the same calendar, the same exhaustion, pretending this conversation never happened? Here's the truth. This is the moment most people run, not because they don't know what they want, but because once you know, you lose the excuse of, I had no choice. And that scares you more than burnout. So I ask you now, what would it look like to live a life you actually chose? Not a life you're just maintaining. Stop and think, and this is not about burning everything down and posting your new life on social media. It's about changing the small, invisible choices that drain your energy every single day. Not a grand reinvention, a quiet redesign, one boundary, one decision, one habit that reflects what you just admitted you want. Now imagine if you applied that to your work. Research shows around 80% of employees are not engaged because their job doesn't match their values. You know that feeling. The professional who keeps chasing promotions, not because they want them, but because that's the treadmill everyone else is on. Then one day, they stop. They negotiate fewer hours. They drop the prestige projects. They choose the meaningful ones. Same field, different design, less performance, more presence. Or the entrepreneur who was chasing ego metrics, bigger office, bigger team, bigger numbers, and a shrinking soul. They downsize, smaller home, leaner business, more control over their time. On paper, it looks like going backwards. In reality, their nervous system finally breathes. Their evenings are not a graveyard of dead energy anymore. They have emotion left for the people they love. This is how you design. You reverse engineer. You don't start with goals, you start with a day. Now imagine if tomorrow was ideal. What time would you wake up? Who would you see? How much silence would you protect? What work would deserve your best attention? And what would never touch your calendar again? When you answer that honestly, you see exactly which obligations, which patterns, which masks have to go. But the truth is, design is not a perfect blueprint, it's an iteration. You choose a direction that is yours, you test it, you adjust. You will feel cognitive dissonance. Your old life will argue with your new choices. That's fine. The point lies in whose voice wins. This is not about building a perfect life, it's about building a chosen one, so that when you're tired at night, it's from effort you believe in, not from maintaining a life you secretly resent. In the next part, we'll take that ideal day you imagined and break it into concrete, uncomfortable moves, so your future isn't just a fantasy you visit in your head, but a reality your actions finally protect. So now you have a picture of a life that would actually feel chosen. But here's the problem: if you don't protect it with a ritual, it will evaporate. Not in one big crisis, in tiny, silent concessions. One favor, one it's fine. One late night email, that's how you drift. Drift is not dramatic. Drift is you waking up 6 months from now and realizing your calendar is full again, your phone is glued to your hand again, your energy is bleeding out through 1,000 small yeses you never consciously gave. No explosion, no breakdown, just a slow return to being permanently available for everyone except yourself. So I ask you now, how many times have you promised yourself change and then watched your old life quietly take the wheel back? I'll tell you why that happens. Because you had a powerful moment, but you didn't build a container. Insight without ritual dissolves. Your conditioning doesn't disappear because you watched one video or had one intense journaling session. The people around you don't suddenly stop expecting your instant reaction. The point lies here. If you don't schedule a recurring conversation with yourself, the world will schedule you for its own purposes. So you need something simple and non-negotiable, a 30-minute appointment with yourself, weekly or at least monthly, where you become unavailable to everyone else and radically available to your own truth. No phone, no notifications, just you, silence, and 3 questions you repeat every time. So you can track the drift instead of pretending it's not happening. You start with what feels off right now, not what looks off on paper, what feels off in your body, in your emotion, in your energy. Where do you feel that quiet resentment, that heaviness when a name pops up on your screen, that tightening before a meeting? Don't explain it away. Don't put a mask on it, just name it. Then you go deeper. What am I tolerating that I wouldn't let someone I love tolerate? This question cuts through your excuses. You would never tell your best friend to stay in that one-sided chat, that draining job, that relationship where their boundaries mean nothing. So why is it acceptable for you? Here's the truth. This is not about being dramatic. It's about being honest about the price you are paying in silence. You end with power, not theory. What one boundary or change would honor me this week? Not 10 changes. 1. Say no to a request. Delay a response. Cancel a fake obligation. Leave one message on read. You don't need a revolution. You need a weekly act of self-respect that proves to your nervous system that you are no longer for sale. And understand this, these sessions will not always feel inspiring. Sometimes they will feel like ripping off bandages you've worn for years. Research shows people literally choose mild electric shocks over sitting alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. Of course you feel resistance. Of course your mind tries to escape into your phone. But the truth is that discomfort is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're finally touching what you usually run from. Now imagine if you did this for 6 months. Same questions, same brutal honesty. You would start to see patterns, where your energy dies, where your presence comes alive, where your reaction is pure habit. That is individuation in real time, not a mystical idea, but a concrete practice of becoming the person you were meant to be, not the one you were trained to be. This ritual becomes your anchor, the place you return to when the world pulls on your availability, your guilt, your old role. Because here's what will happen next. Once you start honoring those answers with real boundaries, the external world will not stay neutral. Some people will adapt, some will rebel, some will disappear. And in the next part, we're going to look directly at that backlash. Who gets angry? Who plays the victim? Who suddenly doesn't recognize you? And how to hold your line when the pressure to go back to your old self becomes almost unbearable. So when you actually do it, when you stop being endlessly available and start honoring those boundaries, the movie doesn't fade to black. It explodes. Phones light up. Group chats whisper. Faces change. The system you live in starts shaking. And you finally see who was attached to you and who was attached to the role you played. Some people will be confused. Are you okay? You're different. Some will be offended. Wow, you've changed. You're selfish now. And some, pay attention here, will be quietly relieved. They will feel your new honesty and think, finally, you're being real. Here's the truth. Your absence exposes every hidden contract that was signed with your old mask. Your new boundary is not just a line, it is a mirror. Now imagine if you stop answering immediately. You don't jump on every crisis at work. You don't reply to every midnight message. One person panics, another gets angry, another just adapts. The reaction is the revelation. Who respects your time, your energy, your silence, and who only respected your usefulness. So I ask you now, who are you actually in relationship with? Real people or your own performance? Families, workplaces, friend groups, they are systems. Systems resist change and they are used to your old role. The fixer, the good one, the always available emotional emergency button. When you step out of that role, the whole system wobbles. Old jokes stop being funny, old dynamics stop working. People try to pull you back, not because they are evil, but because your change forces them to face their own dependence and emptiness. Stop and think about that. Gallup shows most people are disengaged at work, living roles that drain them. Yet when one person quietly refuses overtime, the office treats it like rebellion. It is the same in families. The moment you say no, you become the problem. But the truth is, this is not about you being wrong. It's about the system losing control over free labor, your emotional labor, your time, your life. So when backlash comes, reframe it. That angry reaction when you are slightly less available, that guilt trip when you don't answer immediately, that is not proof that your boundary is unfair. It is proof of how dependent they were on your self-abandonment. Their chaos is feedback. Their drama is data. Your job is not to fix their emotion. Your job is to hold your line. I'll tell you why this turbulence feels so intense. For years, you trained everyone to expect your instant presence. Now you are untraining them. That is going to hurt, for them and for you. But the point lies here. You can endure temporary turbulence, or you can live in permanent resentment. Which pain are you choosing? If you collapse, apologize, and rush back into the old role, you get short-term peace and long-term burnout. If you stay the course, you get short-term discomfort and long-term freedom. This is the real conversation Jung wanted you to have with yourself. Whose life are you living when you say yes? Whose life are you abandoning when you do? And here is the final twist. When you stop being always available to everyone else, you finally become available to the one person who can actually change your life, you. Now stop and think, what does that actually mean in practice? Not as a nice quote. As a way you move tomorrow. Look at the path we've walked in this video. We started with distraction and constant availability, with you as the emotional emergency button for everyone else. Then we went to Jung, to persona and individuation, to this idea that you have been living behind a mask that keeps you acceptable but empty. We exposed how every Automatic yes is a small act of self-abandonment. And then we arrived at that 30-minute conversation with yourself, the one that can rearrange your entire life. Or keep silently poisoning it if you avoid it. Here's the truth. Most people will never have that conversation. They will switch jobs, switch partners, switch countries, but never switch from living on autopilot to asking, what do I actually want? They will stay permanently available, permanently drained, permanently controlled by other people's emotions and expectations. They will die with the same regret palliative nurses hear again and again. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. But the truth is, you are standing at a different doorway. Because you are hearing this. Because you already feel the tension in your chest when I say, life you never chose, and it lands. The point lies here. This is not about boundaries as a productivity hack. It's about identity. Who are you when you stop performing usefulness for everyone else? Who are you when your presence is no longer a free resource they can tap at any hour? So I ask you now, are you going to be most people? Predictable. Always available. Easy to read, easy to guilt trip into one more favor, one more call, one more weekend you didn't want. Or are you going to become a mystery even to yourself? Because you finally dare to sit in silence and ask, if no one was watching, what would I choose? Now imagine if you let that answer rearrange your calendar, your phone, your relationships. You say you were tired, burned out, overwhelmed. I'll tell you why that sentence feels so heavy. You're not tired of life. You're tired of a life you never chose, a life built from reactions instead of decisions, from fear instead of desire. And now you know exactly what to do about it. You withdraw your automatic yes. You reclaim your energy. You make your unavailability a doorway back to your own presence. Most people will hear that and nod. Then scroll to the next video. You cannot afford to be most people anymore. The next step is not more information. The next step is one uncomfortable action in the next 24 hours that proves to you that your identity has shifted. In a moment, I'll tell you exactly what that action can look like and why it will feel terrifying and liberating at the same time. So here is the action, not tomorrow, not when life calms down. Within the next 24 hours, you will schedule a 30-minute non-negotiable meeting with yourself. Phone off, door closed, no music, no notifications, no one gets access to you. For half an hour, you become completely unavailable to the world. So you can finally become available to yourself. You might already feel the resistance. Your brain is saying you don't have time, that it's dramatic, that you'll think about it later. Stop and think you scroll for 30 minutes without noticing. But sitting with your own presence for 30 minutes feels unbearable. I'll tell you why. A 2019 study found people preferred mild electric shocks over being alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. People would rather feel pain than be in truth. That is how deep the avoidance goes. So in that meeting, you are going to ask the questions you have been dodging with busyness and noise. What do I actually want? Not what looks impressive, not what keeps the peace, not what keeps the mask intact. What am I doing right now that I would stop instantly if I weren't afraid of conflict, judgment, or losing approval? What am I pretending is fine that is absolutely not fine? Your job in those 30 minutes is to refuse to look away when the answers appear. Here's the truth. This conversation cannot live only in your head. Your mind is too skilled at rewriting history to protect your comfort. Cognitive dissonance will twist your memory tomorrow and tell you it was not that bad, that you exaggerated, that you should stay available to everyone else. So you will write pen, paper, no editing, no pretty sentences. You will capture the raw answers in front of you, because once they are on the page, the lies lose control. The point lies in making your inner reality visible and undeniable. Then before you stand up, you must choose one concrete shift, one boundary you will set, one no you will finally say, one small change you will implement within the next 7 days, not a life overhaul. A precise move that proves to your nervous system that this is not about inspiration, it's about execution. Maybe it's turning your phone off after 9 p.m. without explanation. Maybe it's telling one person calmly, I won't be available for that anymore. One act where your reaction serves your truth instead of their comfort. And to anchor this new identity, you will not keep it hidden. In the comments or to a trusted person, you will share one part of your life you suddenly realized you never consciously chose. So I ask you now, was it your job, your relationship, your constant emotional babysitting for other people? When you name it publicly, you stop being the passive character. You step into the author of your own presence. Now imagine if this 30-minute meeting was not a one-time emergency, but a ritual of control you repeated every week. What would happen to your energy, your boundaries, your entire sense of value? Hold that question, because next we're going to push this even further and talk about what you must be willing to lose when you finally start telling yourself the truth. Hold that question. And now imagine if you actually honored it. Not as a nice idea, as a line in the sand. Most people avoid the one conversation that matters and then act surprised when their life feels like it belongs to everyone else. You watched this far. You don't get to pretend you didn't hear the invitation. Stop and think, how many years have you been endlessly available to a life you never consciously chose? Always on, always responding, always adjusting your emotions to keep the peace for people who would never do the same for you. You keep waiting for some breakthrough, some rescue, some external sign that it's time to change. But the truth is, no one is coming to rescue you from a life you built by abandoning yourself. The rescue is this conversation, and what you do after it is the truth. If you click away and distract yourself now, you already know what happens. You go back to the same messages, the same obligations, the same mask. You fill your silence with noise so you don't have to feel the weight of your own disappointment. One day turns into 1 year. 1 year turns into 5. Then you wake up with the same regret Bronnie Ware heard on deathbeds around the world. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. But there is another future. There is the future where this video becomes the moment you stop negotiating with your own avoidance. You close the app. You sit in actual silence for 30 minutes. No phone, no music, just you, your breath, your emotions, and the question, what do I actually want and what must die for that to live? The point lies right there, in your willingness to feel the discomfort instead of running from it. So I ask you now, who are you going to be after this ends? Another consumer of motivational content, high on insight, low on action, or the person who uses this as a ritual of control in the right direction, reclaiming your energy, your boundaries, your presence? This is not about hating other people. It's about finally refusing to abandon yourself for their comfort. You are not just someone who listens to big ideas and then goes back to the same reactions. You are someone who can sit down in silence and tell yourself the truth, even when it hurts. You are someone who can say no without a 3-paragraph explanation. Who can let a message sit? Who can let a relationship fade when it only survives on your self-betrayal? So here is your charge. Stop being endlessly available to a life you don't want. Stop giving your control, your time, your energy to every demand that knocks. Become radically available to the one conversation that matters, the one between you and the self you keep postponing, and let everything else change because of it.